I want to read some excerpts and some commentary, I guess, if you want to say that, from different articles from like the Washington Post, Newsweek, various other agencies, rags, if you want to call it that, newspapers, blah, 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 online stuff. So I just want to read some of this to get people thinking and realize how real this is right now, what is going on with the dollar and U.S., China, along with other countries trying to get rid of that as the standard, as the world traded currency for oil and other things like that. And I'm saying this because we've benefited from this over the years, over the decades, because we have that. We have the U.S. dollar as the number one go-to and the one you have to use to trade for oil. You use SWIFT and all that kind of stuff. And other trading, you have to use the U.S. dollar. What does that do? Well, that sort of pigeonholes and handcuffs the other countries, because they have to abide by and go with that and seek out and get in to U.S. dollars in order to be able to trade for oil and that kind of stuff. Well, that benefits U.S. tremendously because the Federal Reserve, continues to print, counterfeit, in my opinion, all these dollars and digits out of thin air, and then you make other countries purchase it in a form of trade or whatever, and then they have to trade with that. So it sort of gives it this false sense of security. It gives people a false sense of security that this is actually worth anything. These empty digits and this paper that this ink is on that says numbers 1, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, those have real value to them. Well, right now they still do because people still have confidence in that, but that's slowly going away. My fear is once this turns, once there's a paradigm shift, once there's a major turn, and China and Russia, like they're going forward, I want to read some of this stuff for you to make it a bigger realization. Once they are out of the U.S. dollars, even out of it 50% than what they are now, once that happens, then dominoes will fall and they will become to be out of it completely, along with multiple other countries, and then we're here sitting on our hands, and we have nothing. We have these digits and dollars that really have no value to them, and it's been exposed, and that time will come because it's a fiat currency, and that happens to every single fiat currency that there ever was since day one of fiat currencies. Everyone has always reverted to its real value of zero eventually. And that's what's going to happen to the US dollar. So I'm just going to read some of this stuff here and make some comments. In March of 2021, China and Russia doubled down on earlier pledges to upend the global reliance on the US dollar and the long-standing global financial system that enables US to strong-arm them. That was from the Washington Post. Institutions such as the New Development Bank established by the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa group, and Beijing-based Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Russia-led Eurasian Economic Union, which is likely closely to China's Belt and Road Initiative, a worldwide series of investments and infrastructure projects involving 140 countries. So that whole conglomerate, that whole BRICS, is all those countries are like, we are on board, we're backing you guys. We want to get rid of this US dollar. We want to get rid of this thing where they can punish people that they don't agree with, I should say, and appreciate and give an upper hand or an advantage to those countries that they deem fit. So I'm saying this because what it seems like is, I don't know if this is going to mean anything to people or not, but when I started in marketing, advertising, that kind of stuff, this was 20 years ago, whatever. When I started that, there was this program called Quark Express, and that was the main layout, the thing, to lay everything out for your ads, for your catalogs, for all that stuff. That was your main program that everyone used, along with your Photoshop and your, Illustrator and that kind of stuff. Quark put it all together, laid it all out. Short of like sheets, you could do catalogs of, 80-page, 100-page, 200-page catalogs just in there. And that's what Quark was for. Well, over the years, working on this, they had issues. And they were like, they never fixed anything, and they never addressed people's issues that they had with this stuff. Now the gripes and complaints, they didn't do anything with it. They didn't expand this out. They didn't change anything. They didn't add good stuff to it that people were craving and asking for, because it was cumbersome to work in. It was difficult. Well, nothing happened. Nothing changed over the years. Well, then Adobe came out with InDesign. This InDesign was basically the same thing, but it had all those elements that people have been asking for Quark to have. Quark Express. Well, and I'm sure, and it seemed like a lot of pushback is like, well, the whole industry is using this across the country, even the world. Everyone's using Quark. It's not going to change because people are used to it. They're not going to change. So they were pretty secure that this is the way it's always been. This is the way it always will be. Well, lo and behold, that InDesign, people, it was so frustrating, Quark was, that people upended it, and they're like, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to have to do a crash and burn. I'm going to learn this overnight. That's what me and some people did at the agency I was working with, because we're going to go this route, because we got this new project and this new catalog, and it has all these other elements to allow us to do, which would be easier once we learn it versus going the old way we've always done it, using Quark. So we crashed and burned, and we learned it as we were working on it to try to hit a deadline. It wasn't easy, but we did it. So then what happened? We never went back to Quark again. That was just a small agency I was in. But then I went to another agency. I introduced them to InDesign because that's how I learned. I learned on the spot. Crash and burn, just figuring it out. So I went to a large agency with this, proposed it. I got everyone to take over, to use InDesign, to have an InDesign takeover, and the whole agency went to that. And we're talking hundreds of people, multiple hundreds of people went to using that. It wasn't tough. It wasn't tough. A little learning curve here and there, that kind of stuff, but it wasn't tough. And once we did that, that was huge. Then we would just hear other agencies that we talked to, other people at different agencies we talked to, yeah, they did that too, or they're doing that, or they have plans to do it here and there. Well, looking back at it, 5, 7, 10 years later, even more, I mean, that was the past. Quark was the past. Now it's InDesign, and that is used all over. That's the standard that Quark once stood on and thought there was no pushing them off. They didn't have to do anything much to appease the people. Well, that's what happens. I'm saying this as comparison to the dollar standard, the American dollar, U.S. dollar. The Federal Reserve note has been the standard for so long. That has been what everyone's known as, the gold standard is what they used to call it. That's the thing. That's the thing you trade with. That's the thing for oil. That's the thing for this. That's the thing for that. Well, there's arrogance there, and it's going to change. And we are not going to be that standard anymore. And what happens then? You and I and everyone else that are citizens, we lose out. We lose out hard, and we lose out fast. Because all that stuff that's been saving in your 401k, your IRAs, in your bank accounts, whatever, cash under your mattress, your pillowcase, whatever, is all going to change from being the standard to being just some, fiat currency from some country that used to be the standard is no longer, and it doesn't hold any value near what it used to. And there's no going back. So you and I, all of us citizens, we're going to be the ones to hold the big brunt end of this and get the largest harm from it. So what can you do in that? It's what I've always said. Make sure you're selling this fiat currency, your digits, your dollars. You're selling all this stuff that's going to become worthless real soon, and investing in something that's going to hold your value. It's going to hold purchasing power. Gold, silver, land, assets. I've talked about food, seeds, water, some sort of water investment somehow for yourself and your family. Guns and ammo. All that stuff holds value. And it holds it a ton better than this fiat currency, digits, paper, whatever you want to call it. 401k, and what's in your 401k, IRAs, that kind of stuff. So, I'm just saying this, what's in your pensions too? Same deal. Your pensions, especially from the government, they won't stop giving out pensions. But the question is, how much purchasing power will your pensions have once this crashes and goes away? Anyways, that was sort of a long, dive down comparison thing, but sorry about that. And I'm going more, a few more things. So historically, you wouldn't necessarily see decline in use of the dollar. It would happen relatively quick. So I take that to mean we wouldn't necessarily be able to predict with a great deal of confidence that there's a significant or consequential move away from the dollar. And then, he said, historically, we wouldn't know it until it happens. So it's like you're not going to see this train coming from a long distance away. You might just see a corner of a track, and once it's there, and here comes the crash. That's what this is going to feel like. We got Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin agreed to accelerate attempts to create a system that cannot be influenced by a third party. China and Russia have pledged to speed up their efforts to set up an independent trade network to reduce their influence and reliance. To reduce the U.S.'s influence and reliance of U.S.-led international financial systems. Third countries will not be able to influence this network. So third countries are saying anything outside of U.S. and China's standard they're producing. Any third countries, any countries outside the scope of what they're creating would not be able to influence like U.S. does now. Bank of Russia governor told a parliamentary session 2 years ago that the de-dollarization policy was needed to mitigate Russian external risks on both an economic and political culture. In the first 10 months of 2021, Russia exported more than 12 billion cubic meters of natural gas to China along the power of Siberia gas pipeline. Along the power, that sounds weird the way they wrote it, but anyways, launched in 2019, that is nearly triple the 4.1 billion cubic meters of natural gas Russia exported to China for all of 2020. So they've tripled the gas exportation to China. Russia had almost doubled electricity supply to China to 555 million kilowatt hours per month. So they're working together hand in hand. The large-scale printing of money has triggered a global inflation, and the trust of countries in the U.S. dollar has plummeted. That's what's happening all over. It's obvious that the U.S. economy is in a weak state, and China's economic recovery speed during the epidemic can be said to lead the world. That's what's happening. The more Washington attempts to block these countries with all their things, where they put sanctions on Iran, sanctions on Russia, sanctions on this country, that country. So the more they attempt to block these countries, sanctions, that kind of stuff, the more resourceful they will become, and the more likely they will be to cooperate with each other. All the other countries cooperate with each other to thwart U.S. efforts. So you're putting all these sanctions on all these countries like they always have to try to get an upper hand, and that's going away because these countries are like, we're done with this. We're done with being punished like the parent is the United States of America. We're done with this garbage, so we're going to work together and figure out something ourselves. So by Russia saying that, and China saying that, they're working together and they're reaching out to these other countries saying, okay, we need to bypass, we need to get around U.S. sanctions and U.S. control right now. Inevitably, what happens in the end of that is that just makes the U.S. dollar dwindle and go away, like I talked about, like a thing on a vine, dying fruit on a vine that doesn't get the nutrients. It gets ignored so much, they start their deal, and that will become the standard. And pretty soon, like I said before, the Federal Reserve note, the U.S. dollar, will become just some other fiat currency from a country that used to be in charge. Okay, I had another battery issue there. I had to change batteries. Anyways, so that's going to be that the dollar, the Federal Reserve note will be from a country that used to be in charge. That's what I was saying, and that's sort of like these sanctions and the U.S. saying we got all this power. We are the main thing. There's no turn around us. There's no working around us. I'm just going to adjust this here. And this is what we got. And there's nothing you can do about it. Well, I just want to say something similar to that is the drug war. The U.S. says, you know what, drugs are illegal. All these drugs that our doctors don't prescribe are illegal. You cannot use them. You cannot buy them. You cannot sell them. You cannot grow them. You cannot create them. Whatever the case is. Well, I get news for you. People work around that. People work other ways, and they figure it out. If that's what they want, and they're going to make it happen, no matter what anyone says. As a matter of fact, the more people say you can't do it, some people like myself, I want to do it even more. Because no one should be able to tell me what I can and cannot do, as long as I'm not harming anyone else. So I put that to the equivalent of, well, drugs are illegal. Drugs you can't grow, you can't create, you can't purchase, you can't buy, you can't sell, all that kind of stuff. Well, I got news for you. I bet you anybody, within a week's time at the most, can get themselves probably any illegal drug they want and purchase it. If there's a will, there's a way, and it's all out there. It's all available. Everything you want, you can find. Even though it's illegal, even though people are jailed for it, people are put in prison for it, even though it's so bad and looked down upon from our government, doesn't mean a thing. That's the same thing that's going to happen with this U.S. dollar. All these sanctions, all this control they've had and they're trying to keep, and the more control they're trying to have and do to these countries, the country's going to be like, all right, we'll figure it out. We're going to work around it first, and then we're going to encapsulate it and become the standard. And that's what's going to happen. And then, like I said, you and I suffer the most. So you got to be prepared for that. I'll read a few more here, and then I'll cut this. I won't say short, but I'll cut this so it doesn't go much longer. European countries are also actively accelerating the process of de-dollarization. Old European countries such as Germany and France hope to enhance the status of the euro. So now they're focused on the euro. And Russia and China are focusing on their deal that they're trying to get happening. And all of them are working, in some sense, together and excluding the U.S. We got Putin took action as early as 2017. In June 2021, Russia even indicated that it will make progress in the de-dollarization of oil export trade. Rebel parties in Russia stated that if the United States continues to impose impose economic sanctions on Russia, Russia will quickly give up choosing the U.S. dollar as a settlement currency in oil trade. It is worth mentioning that the U.S. dollar is not removed as the settlement currency in the first international trade. Earlier in the China trade agreement between Iran and China, Iran abandoned the U.S. dollar as the settlement currency in oil trade and used the renminbi as a settlement currency. Saudi Arabia also reduced frequency of using U.S. dollars in oil trade. This shows that the current treatment of the U.S. dollar is unwelcome as the United States itself. Period. Russia also announced that it will establish a non-dollar bank exchange system this year. This is to prevent the United States from intervening in the bank transfer system through SWIFT. That's a global international financial communications association system. Russia will also provide the system to Mexico and other countries. Russia, once you have your own SWIFT system or your own system similar to SWIFT, you can speed up the process of de-dollarization. It is reported that Russia announced that it will clear its own 35% of U.S. dollars assets, get 35% of U.S. dollars assets off their books, and will reserve 40% of the euro, and will also reserve 40% of euros and 30% of renminbi for their trade. In addition, Russia, which bears the brunt, in March of 2021, and 7 countries, including China, Japan, and Britain, also sold $50.5 billion in U.S. debt. Based on declining confidence in the U.S. dollar, more and more countries are selling U.S. debt. Far more than 50 countries have started the de-dollarization model. So with that going on, and then it says Russia will completely remove the U.S. dollar assets from its National Wealth Fund. The Russian National Wealth Fund, once changes are complete, they say the share of euro assets in the fund is expected to stand at 40%, the yuan at 30%, and gold is at 20%. So that's basically most of the makeup of their NWF, the Russian National Wealth Fund. The messaging is we don't need the U.S. We don't need to transact in dollars, and we are invulnerable to more U.S. sanctions, he said in research a note after the announcement, adding that it could be interpreted as a sign that Moscow is experiencing more sanctions from the U.S. So I'm saying this stuff, so it's because, like I said, you gotta just take hold of what's really going on, because it's not going to be a slow burn. It's here, then it's gone. Your 401k is here, then it's gone, down to basically nothing. Your IRA is here, then it's gone, down to basically nothing. For the most part, that's what's going to happen. Just like your pensions. I mean, your bank account is here, and it's gone. I mean, the numbers won't change. The numbers really won't change. But the purchasing power is going to change. What you can get for that is going to change. Basically down to nothing. And I want to make people aware of that. And also this whole talk about Ukraine and America being so concerned about Ukraine borders, and then people are, well, they should care about, the borders by Mexico and that kind of stuff because of the invasion, like but they don't care about that, but they care about Ukraine. None of that border stuff really bothers me much. The biggest thing we got to do is get rid of all the freebies, all the giveaways, you come here, you can't make it, you can't do this, you can't do that. Here, have all this stuff. Once that stops, then the invasion that they call it, from all the people trying to invade us from Mexico through Mexico, will stop. That will come to an end. Plain and simple. But anyways, to get off that, what happens when a country, basically the United States, and we have been the main contributor of this, starts having issues? We're inflating, we're uncontrollably inflating, soon to be hyperinflation, like I've said. That's my opinion only. What happens when they can't control it? What happens when the economy's crashing? What happens when all of a sudden the stock market's going to start crashing? Well, what's the way they get us out of that? Because there's nothing they can do. They don't have anything in their tool belt that's going to change it. They can't raise interest rates like they did in the 80s to try to combat this at all. Because once they do that, that will just be like lighting a match to the fire, or putting gasoline on the fire is a better analogy. It's not gonna help it. It's gonna burn it down faster and quicker. And they know that because they are not standing on any kind of fertile soil, any firm ground anymore. It's all a game of cards. It's ridiculous. But what happens is they bring you to war. That's what's happening. They're bringing us to war. Because in a wartime, all bets are off. There's no constitution they have to worry about. There's no freedom stuff they have to worry about. There's nothing. And then they can just print and print and print and print and print and keep printing, and no one questions it. They got to do it because of the war. They got to do it because of protection. They got to do it because of this and that and this and that. It's what they do when they're in dire times that they know they're trying to band-aid and push out, is they bring us to war. And that's what's going to happen. That's my opinion only, but I'm saying that. And with that, it might be a war like there was in the 90s, that quick little thing they call Desert Storm, or there might be something 20 years later, we put our tail between the legs and run out of there, like we did just in 2021, and like they did Vietnam. It might be something like that, and that's even better for them because we can be somewhere for 20 years, occupy a place for 20 years, and keep pushing all this money, and printing all this stuff because we need more and more, things for war. We need more and more stuff for here to protect us from war. We need more and more this or that, whatever. So that's what happens, and that's my opinion. That's what's happening. And then on another note, from that, if that really doesn't do it, because no one's really behind it, like everyone's behind, invading Iraq, that kind of stuff. No one's really behind this, except for the politicians on both sides. Those are the only ones that are behind it, supporting it. No one else really is. If this really doesn't work, if it doesn't pan out like they want it to, then they is. Up their sleeve, they still have that alien invasion thing. They can do that. They started talking about early 2021, or maybe it was in 2020. They was talking about here and there, just getting that in people's realm, get that here, so they're used to it, so it's not a shock when they say it's happening. So they have that, and if they have to pull that out, they will. They got more tricks up their sleeves. So I'm just saying this because it's not about safety. It's not about you. It's not about protecting what the citizens have, that kind of stuff. All it is a COIA, cover their what, and make sure they get rich and benefit, more powerful, as everyone else they're feeding off of gets less and less powerful, less and less freedom, but they still have enough to keep feeding the beast and the parasites that we call the political parties and politicians and those that control those puppets. Anyways, this got long-winded. I just wanted to get these things out there, get people thinking, and it's now. You can't get assets as cheap as you could have a year or 2 years ago when I started saying this stuff on video, but it's still on clearance, in my opinion. It's not blue light savings clearance. It's not like the buy of a century clearance kind of stuff, but it's not still on clearance because of what they're doing to the U.S. dollar. Anyways, I thank you for watching, and if you like this, hit the like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. And as always, stay vigilant, protect yourself, protect your family, protect your health, and